Good start. Yes, guys, I'm Si. Welcome to Cardiff City World. This is the Breakdown Podcast. It is Sunday night. It's slightly different this week as it's not the day after the game, which I like to do to take the emotion out of it a little bit. But we are the day of the game, match reaction. Of course, we will talk the manager situation and whatever else comes up in the comments and the questions, of course. But delighted to be joined once again by author and journalist, Mr. Paul Abbandonato. How are you, Paul? You good?
I'm okay, thanks. We just got back from Bristol, actually, which was quite a long trip back, believe it or not, because of all the traffic and made the worse as a result of what happened at Ashton Gate earlier. But doubtless we'll get into all that, Si.
Yes, indeed, mate. I would imagine a wet one as well, mate. That rain was coming down.
Yeah, well, it wasn't too bad once the game was over. Actually, I think that was during the game more than on the journey home. But there were plenty of floods on the way. Let's put it that way.
So before I sort of throw over to you and hear your thoughts, there's a couple of things I'd like to touch on. First and foremost, Ruben Corwell starts a few games in a row and finds a bit of consistency. Who would have thought? Amazing. And you obviously have to have played the game to have realised that. Same with Ollie Tanner, mind. You know, these players have been showing in glimpses, but they kept getting removed from the team or rotated or whatever you want to call it. So I'm happy for them in particular to be able to show that a bit of consistency in their performance. I thought Ruben was excellent, bar that one miss. But also against Millwall, I thought he was excellent. Same with Tanner. Thought he was very good. I thought Joel Bagan was excellent. Again, Alnwick looks solid. Thought Gutas was pretty good. I thought he started a little bit nervous today, but then once he settled in, he was fine. And I thought Alex Robertson was absolutely excellent again. Who else was it? I thought Siopis added something when he came on as well. I thought he gave us a bit of energy and legs in midfield that we'd lacked as the second half went on. But obviously the thing to start with is, I think, first half was not great. It was okay, but not great. But the second half, Cardiff started like a house on fire, and I thought they were excellent. The way they pressed, they didn't give Bristol any time to settle. And they played some fantastic, 1-2 touch football, lovely movement. Very, very good. Scored an excellent goal, which we actually, came from pressing and winning. And then had two big chances straight after the goal. Tanner's got that one. He gets a bit wayward with it. And Rubens should be hitting that with his right foot for me. But it's frustrating because I didn't think Ruben put much of a foot wrong for the whole game. But that is a chance you've got to be taking at that level. And Bristol were on the ropes. And obviously we'll talk about the change in shape and tactics, which completely changed the game. But what was frustrating to me wasn't just that Cardiff were on top. It wasn't just how Cardiff were playing. It wasn't how much we were pressing. It was the fact that Bristol's fans had turned on them. They were booing their own team. They were frustrated. The atmosphere was, they were kind of going at their own team. The Bristol players were making mistakes. All we had to do was carry on the way we were going. And I understand El Ghazi's not fully up to speed. He needed to be taken off and managed. That's fine. I felt like, put Willock on and just a straight swap. That would have been okay for the time. It just, the second, and I will say, I didn't even have a massive problem with going 3 at the back and putting Darland on if we had gone 3-5-2 and had Bagan and NG or Bagan and Tanner probably preferably as the wing backs, and he'd left Robinson with Ruben just off him. So you keep the sort of shape in the midfield and the attack, but you give yourself a bit more defensive solidity. I could understand that. But what we did was we played 5 at the back, 4 in midfield, and a false 9 in Ruben. And it just gave all the momentum and all the impetus to Bristol, who at that point weren't playing well, and basically said, you have the ball and see if you can score against us. And, we've all seen how we've defensively done this season. it was mind-boggling, and maybe a bit of, managerial naivety, because he went defensive too early, and I think we should have killed the game. But I'm interested in what you think, Paul. You talk me through your afternoon.
Just very quickly, in terms of the players who played well, Si, I've also jotted down, in case we forget, I thought Callum Chambers had his best game for Cardiff by some distance today, so I thought he was excellent today as well, for what it's worth. I actually thought, just before the subs took place, literally a couple of minutes before the subs happened, actually, I was thinking, and I, this team is actually playing with a bit of swagger now. There's a bit of arrogance here. I was noticing some of the things Ruben was doing, sort of crossfield passes, sort of almost nonchalant, which was still going to the man, and one or two others playing sort of clever little intricate balls. And I just thought, there's a confidence actually starting to come through their veins here. I haven't seen this sort of swagger and arrogance from Cardiff for a long time. They're going to get another couple of goals here, because I actually didn't mind Tanner and Ruben missing those chances, for what it's worth, Si, because at least they were proper chances. I had a real issue with Errol Bullock claiming that his team were playing well, creating chances, outplaying the opposition, controlling games. Utter rubbish. They barely created a chance of note under Errol's watch earlier this season. So I actually don't mind missing genuine chances, because it shows that they are actually creating. But I felt there were, I haven't thought of that phrase, Bristol were on the ropes, but they were on the ropes. Cardiff were on the ascendancy. They were about to put their foot on the throat. And I'm hesitating even now, because as the subs took place, I was sort of having a look 2 or 3 times thinking, is that really Jesper Darland he's brought on? He's brought on another centre-back. Why? And why is Callum O'Dowd on instead of Willock? I couldn't understand either of those options. And then obviously he changed it. And as part of the change of shape, he put Colwell up top. Colwell was the fulcrum of that team. He was the one making everything happen. It was going through him. Him going up top, away from the 10 position, meant that nobody could get the ball to him. So he was starved of possession as well. Whichever way you look at it, it was wrong. Now, Omar has defended it afterwards, saying, we wanted to stop crosses into the box and stop pressure. Well, number one, Gutas and Chambers were coping more than adequately with headers away from the box, yeah? And number two, the best way to stop pressure is to have the ball yourself, to force the team back into their own half, which is what Cardiff were doing. So whichever way I look at it, I could almost understand, but not when they're halfway through the half. And in modern day football, there can be anything up to 10 minutes of injury time. There were 6 today, for what it's worth, 6 and a bit. So you're almost playing 35 minutes with a defensive shape when you're in total control of the game. And all the momentum was lost the moment those substitutions were made. So while the point is welcome, and I'm sure a lot would have accepted it before the game, to me, that is a massive opportunity missed today. And it has to be down to the manager, I'm afraid, which, I don't think will hold him in good stead when it comes to him wanting to get the job full time, which I'm sure we'll come on to in due course. Just one other thing I'll say before going back to your site. There were signs of this against Millwall when he got away with it in that one, when he took Ollie Tanner off, and he sent Rinomota on. And again, Cardiff were very much in the ascendancy at that point. They were ripping them apart down the right-hand side with Ruben and Tanner. And it was crying out for Ashford to come on to keep that momentum going. And again, I think another goal would have come against Millwall. Instead, the initiative was surrendered, and actually Cardiff got away with it. But if you think back to the last 10, 15 minutes against Millwall, after that sub was made, Millwall were very much in the ascendancy towards the end, and it was a bit of a fingernail biting exercise. So the warning signs were there, if we're honest with ourselves, against Millwall. At least it wasn't for as long. Today, it was just crazy to do that so early in the game, as far as I'm concerned. And frustrating, very frustrating.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, let's look at some of the positives. So first and foremost, I think Omar Risa and Gavin Ward and Darren Pearce, the people who've come in on an interim basis. I think they deserve a lot of credit for bringing that dressing room together. And over the past 3 games, and I would include even the whole game, because I felt in the whole game we got punished for some silly mistakes. But generally, you could see an improvement in the way we were set up and the way we were trying to play. And then obviously the Millwall game was better, particularly the second half. And then today, again, the second half was a real good start to it. So I think he does deserve credit for, one, bringing the dressing room together, and they look together again now. Whereas a couple of weeks ago, they looked like they didn't want to speak to each other. Whereas now they genuinely look together. Second of all, obviously he's got us on the front foot. Not that it was particularly difficult to be more attacking than we were a few games ago, because we were literally retreating. But I do think he deserves credit for that. I think he deserves credit for putting Alex Robertson in. It blows my mind that Alex Robertson hasn't started pretty much every game since he's come to the club, because we were crying out for a number 8 who was so technically capable and young and got all these attributes. I also think, as I mentioned, playing Ollie Tanner from the start, who so often found himself on the bench last year. These little decisions he's got right, and I think he deserves credit for that. He did get it wrong today, but he also got it right at half-time. Whatever he said to them at half-time, they came out and showed what this team is capable of, whether it was the way they pressed, the way they moved the ball quickly with minimal touches, the movement off the ball, the link-up play between Colwell, Tanner, Robertson has been excellent. I think Ruben and El Ghazi have linked up well. And let's not forget, El Ghazi misses an absolute sitter in the first half from 2 yards out. I don't know if you've had a chance to see that one back on TV, mate, but wow.
I haven't seen it back. I didn't. Yeah. I just presumed it was offside at the time, but it clearly wasn't.
Yeah, he was like 5 yards. He was well onside between when the shot was taken. But look, it happens. He's not fully a match fit, and I think he just a bit of rustiness, got his legs in a bit of a tangle. Joel Bagan, absolute 100% positive again, and I think Joel Bagan deserves a lot of credit, because there's people like me in the summer who probably had him on the for sale list, to be honest. And I think every game he's played this year has been absolutely fantastic. I think he deserves so much credit for that, because I think most people thought, Jamalu Collins will come back from injury and he'll probably slot in there. But I think Joel Bagan has been a breath of fresh air, because he's defensively sound. And I also think that going forward, Joel offers more than Jamalu Collins does generally. Jeff, I can tell you that's wrong, by the way, the last comment that you just put there. So there is some positives to take from Omar Reese's little stint over the last few games, without a doubt. But you obviously can't ignore the obvious, in that we went defensive and we went very, very early. So it's frustrating, because I thought we played some very, very good football in that second half. And when you've got the crowd, when you've got the home crowd booing the opposition, that's when you've got to put teams away. And maybe that ruthlessness for the team will come. I think it's taken them these last 2 games to build a bit of confidence as well. Let's assume, for the sake of this hypothetical question, Paul, let's assume Cardiff appoint a manager in the international break. What do you make of Omar Reese's 3 games in charge?
It's been a mixed bag. I suppose I'm coming from a position of thinking they've got to get what I term a proper manager from the start. So there's a little bit of that playing on my mind, I suppose. But yeah, you give credit where credit's due. He's turned around the mindset there very quickly. But Simon, I don't think that was too difficult to do. What I would say is I consistently said this is a damn good squad of players who have been terribly underachieving this season, and we can see the reasons why now. And turn things around. You're right, in tilt up. I get that. Confidence did need to be built up. But you make the point about he picked Robertson and Ruben as if, and he has done, but that's not nuclear science.
No, of course, but
it's patently obvious those two should be in the team, and should have been under Errol. It's patently obvious that a team that's lacking pace needs Ollie Tanner in it because he's got pace. He's one of the few who has. It's patently obvious that Callum Robinson is a better striker than Wilfred Kanga. Now, I appreciate these decisions. They weren't necessarily being picked. Those decisions weren't necessarily being made under his predecessor, but I wouldn't hold them out. And you're right about Bagan. I thought Bagan was excellent away to Derby, to be honest with you. I've mentioned this on the show before. I thought Callum O'Dowd ahead of him let him down, to be honest with you. I thought Bagan tried to be positive, tried to get forward, tried to be positive passes to get O'Dowd down the outside, but he wanted it short or played inside. And again, I think his first point of call right from the start today is to try to look to play positive passes up the line, positive passes forward. It makes such a lovely change from this slow, ponderous go back approach that we saw previously from pretty much all the defence, but it's certainly including the left back. So it's no coincidence to me that the younger players, Ruben, Bagan, Robertson, have re-energized, have brought tempo to the team, have brought legs and energy and athleticism and ability as well. We've mentioned before how Errol picked the oldest team in the league, and it just didn't look mobile. It didn't look sharp. These younger players sort of bring a freshness and a tempo that is badly needed, and that's why another reason. I for the life of me I can't understand why young Reindorf wasn't on the bench today rather than Kanga. Already I've seen that Reindorf can offer more to this team. So you give, it's probably a mixed bag. You give credit where credit's due. He made a fundamental error today, which could well prove costly, Simon. If it is, it is. But yeah, he deserves some credit for turning the mindset around as well. But I do think, and I come back to it again, this is a damn good squad of players that Cardiff have got. Yeah, there are gaps. There needs to be the goal scoring centre forward. There's a lack of pace, but I still think that can be got around within the current setup by playing one or two younger players. But it's a very good squad of players that is a top 10 squad, not bottom of the league squad. So whoever comes in now as manager hopefully does turn this around very quickly. There's a couple of very winnable home games coming up against Portsmouth and Plymouth, which could get the new manager off to a flyer, if you like, if they can get this appointment right during this international break. So yeah, I think Reese deserves credit for stabilising the ship, changing the mindset, turning things around. Is he the right man to get the job full time? He thinks he is. I'm far from convinced about that, if you're asking me, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. Just on that, average age of Cardiff's 11 for the last couple of games has been 27.2, which is a big change from the beginning of the season. So there's obviously lots to discuss. The thing on Reindorf, so I'm told by some of the guys who watch every under 21s game that he isn't ready. But I 110% agree with you that he offers more as a striker, as a team, as a substitute than what Wilfred Kanga does. As an example, today, in the 94th minute, now bear in mind, at about 78 minutes, Ruben Colwell was out on his feet. In the 94th minute, after Gutas goes off, Bristol have a free kick, we clear it, they go back to their keeper just inside their own half. Ruben Colwell run from the edge of our box to press the goalkeeper, whilst Wilfred Kanga was walking just inside our half, and he runs beyond him and then goes and presses. Doesn't win the ball or anything, but it's the desire, the work rate for your team, for your teammates. I don't see it with Kanga. I see him a lot of walking, jogging. He doesn't press. Now, to me, I can excuse a lack of ability. What I cannot excuse is a lack of effort and a lack of commitment. And I never thought I would say this, but if it comes down to it, I'd rather play Mate up front than Kanga, because at least with Mate, he will hold the ball up and he'll link up with Ruben, with El Ghazi, with Tanner, and he'll bring them into play. So you can use him as a target and as a bounce ball. Whereas Kanga doesn't offer that. He doesn't work, he doesn't work hard. I think we look better with Callum Robinson up front. My one concern generally with Callum Robinson, I mentioned it a little bit the other day, he seems to drop very deep. And I think he's more effective if he's on the centre-back and he's playing off the last man. There was a couple of times in the first half and early in the second half where Ruben, or I think it was Ollie Tanner, played like a little flick around the corner, assuming he was going to be sort of where the central striker would be. And he was back in the midfield. He was like very deep. So I'd like to see Callum Robinson just play a little bit, on the last man almost and running in behind. But yeah, I mean, I do agree with CCFC insiders just there. People do ignore that Kanga tries to get others to press with him. But so I fully understand that. But I don't think he could ask for that today, and particularly in the second half, because we did press and we did go as a unit. Previously, I can fully grasp that and understand it. But I also agree with Reese has just said that the whole team plays too deep generally, like particularly in the first half. We sit so deep, we invite pressure. If you just move 10 yards up the pitch as a team, I think that would help considerably. So what I want to ask you, Paul, is who's going to be the next Cardiff City manager?
I don't think the Cardiff City hierarchy know the answer to that question, Simon. So I've got no hope.
Oh, I think they got a little idea now.
Well, now is the operative word, right? Because this has been going on for some time. My understanding of the situation is this: we know that they canvassed some help from two former managers to give them guidance on who it should be. My understanding is that the shortlist that was drawn up was deemed so underwhelming. Well, you're the one ripping it up. Was deemed so underwhelming that they've had to reboot and, I don't know if start again is the right phrase, but let's just say look in a different direction. Yeah. And so because of that, you still can't rule out the likes of Steven Schumacher and Ryan Lowe and Omar and Alexanderson, who I think were on the initial shortlist. But I think the club have come to the conclusion that the job is bigger than, and it is a big job, Si. I don't think Cardiff fans realise how big this job is, right? As a member of the media, I do this. Cardiff City gets a ridiculous amount of publicity and scrutiny because it's a capital city club. It's a media centre here. It's an equivalent of a Birmingham or a Liverpool or a Manchester or a Newcastle, one of the big media hubs, if you like. There's, because of that coverage, there's greater scrutiny. There's a massive sense of expectation from the fan base who see the club as a sleeping giant. And I think it is as well. And so, because of all this, you need a manager with some gravitas. You need in that hot seat. You need somebody with personality who can take the heat, who the job won't swallow up, which I think it has done with previous appointments that Vincent Tanner's made. And you also need a manager who is shrewd enough to manage upstairs, if you see what I mean. Yes. Not all of them can do that. There aren't too many Neil Warnocks in this world who can do that sort of thing. So I'm not convinced. If those other guys really were on the initial shortlist, I think there's a danger the job could have swallowed them up. I really do. So I think from what I can understand, they're looking in another direction now. There may be I'd be remiss to come up with names, to be honest with you, at the moment, because it might be inaccurate anyway. But I think the fact that they have, I think you used that, you did that, didn't you? I think the fact they've done that, personally, I think that's a positive step, because
Yes,
I
I agree.
think appointing any of the individuals who we were told were on the original shortlist would have been a retrograde step, to be honest with you. So if they are looking in a different direction now, good on them for doing so. I think, even if it's delayed the appointment. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think it's important. Yeah, pretty much the same. I think of the original shortlist, I think there was one, from what I gather, that they quite liked, but obviously not enough that they appointed him. And I just think that it's important they get it right, not just because of this season, obviously, because I think people forget, and we've got caught up a little bit in, we're bottom of the league. We only had 1 point. We only had 1 goal. Oh my God, we're going to get relegated. But there's like 30 plus games left. With this squad, a decent manager could still make the playoffs without, having to do something unspeakable in terms of the run that they'd need to go on to achieve it. But also the reason I think it's important we get the right guy in place, and one of the reasons I wish we'd appoint a football structure above the said manager, is in 18 months' time, when some people come back from their loans and stuff, this I worked out the other day, mate, that we could field a spine of a team under 25 of, for example, excluding the goalkeeper, but Jack Alnwick, Darland, Will Fish, Alex Robertson, Joel Colwell, Ruben Colwell, and Isaac Davis. And I think that's not massively unrealistic to think that those players could be first team contenders. At least, obviously, Joel is the one question mark with it. But they're all under 25, mate. Like the future, and that's not including Tanner, who's young. That's not including K Pacquiao, Louis Giles, and Reindorf, and a whole host of other players who sometimes don't get the same coverage from the 21s, who are very, very good. Like, we have this exceptional crop of young players coming through. So whilst I think it's important to, I did say not including Alnwick, whilst I think it's important that we get the right manager for now and this season, what I don't want to see is a manager come in, like, for instance, when Neil Warnock was here, he didn't think Ruben Colwell was good enough. So I want a manager who, just my personal opinion, but I think it's important that we get a manager who will bring on the youth and believe in the youth that we've got, because we have a group coming through who are very, very capable. And I don't want to see them moved on because the manager doesn't want to play with 21-year-olds or 22-year-olds, and he wants to play, with a 28. He wants to go with a more experienced squad. And then we see all these different players that I've just mentioned playing for different clubs around Europe or whatever and succeeding. And we're all thinking, oh, for God's sake, why didn't Cardiff give him a chance? So it's been a rough start to the season, but I don't think it's of course it's been a dreadful start to the season, but it's not like it's all over and we're going down and that's it. Like, there's a lot of positivities that I think you can still look for. Just going, sorry, Paul, there was one point I forgot to bring up about the game, which I wanted to point out to, was, and I don't like to single out players and say how, like, they're poor or whatever, but I have to say that Callum O'Dowda today, he didn't look, I don't know whether he's come back from injury and he didn't look at it. I thought how can I put this without, I don't want to sound disrespectful, but there was a 50-50 just before the goal, which, let's say he didn't go in too full-blooded. The winger wins the ball, crosses it in, and they score. He was surely brought on to protect Joe Bagan. So I thought that, as one of the senior players, he should have just got rid of that ball and, been brave and just made sure that he won that ball. But that's just my opinion. I saw the other thing, going back to Siopis, what I thought he gave us was energy and legs. which I think we desperately need. And I think I would like to see him next to Alex Robertson. However, he also gave the ball away twice from relatively simple passes, but then went and won it back. I just think his additional pace in the middle could be beneficial for some games. But anyway, going back to the manager situation, mate. Do you disagree with anything I said regarding the importance of it being someone who believes in bringing young players through?
I agree with you 100%, but I don't think that'll happen, Simon. That's the problem. I think it will. It might
Shouldn't
well
that
end
be
up
one of
being.
the criteria that they're looking at?
Well, we'll come on to that, and I'll come on to a name in a moment, okay? That will cause a debate, right? But it's relevant.
I love it.
I suspect it will be a short-term appointment, probably to the end of the season. In which case, the scenario that you're talking about won't happen. I remember writing an article for Wales Online after the win over Southampton which was inspired by the kids, wasn't it? It was inspired by Conte, who you and I are still flabbergasted was allowed out on loan. Same with Eli King, as far as I'm concerned. Conte on one side, it was inspired by Louis Giles on the other. They helped set up. Obviously, Ruben ran the show, and Ashford got the winner. Yeah, those two both had assists. The fullbacks. Yeah. And I remember writing an article saying something along the lines of Cardiff City have just been given a glimpse into a golden future. It takes some major mismanagement to botch this up. Yeah. And then you added some interesting summer signings, let's put it that way. And I thought, there's a good squad here now. Utilize these kids properly as well. And this team is really going to push on. And instead of the golden future, we saw the oldest team in the league lose 2-0 to Sunderland, 5-0 to Burnley, 2-0 to Middlesbrough. Can't even remember the Derby score, Si. What was it? I can't even remember it. It was another defeat, though. And I just thought, what an opportunity blown here. And then the negativity again against Leeds as well. So you're right. I can't recall a crop quite as golden as this one. There was the period where back in Eddie May's time, we had Nathan Blake, Jason Perry, Damon Searle. With respect to Jason and Damon, they were lower league footballers. Blakey obviously went to the very top. I thought even Blakey could have done a bit more, to be honest with you. He was that good. But then we had, under Sam Hammam, we had, didn't we have sort of Earnshaw and Gabardon came through at the same time, Joe Ledley and Aaron Ramsey followed them. So, a brilliant crop of footballers there, obviously. Yeah, particularly Aaron and Gabardon, and Earnshaw was a brilliant goal scorer, and Joe Ledley was a wonderful sort of servant. But numbers wise, this is a greater crop. And what's the point? What's the point of the academy, Simon? From a business model point of view, what's the point of not picking your better younger players and then selling them for vast sums of money in the future to reinvest in the club and so on? What's the point of just signing old players who have no sell-on value and that sort of thing? So you're right, the squad is far more fit, despite Bullet picking an old team. As a whole, the squad is far more fit for purpose now because there are these academy kids coming through. Robertson is 21, as you say. You've got Fish, you've got Darland, you've got players of the right, Joel Bagan, you've got players, Isaac Davis, you mentioned, there's Ashford as well. You've got players of the right age demographic now with a few experienced players around them to offer real hope for the future with a manager who would believe in younger players, yeah? But I think if Cardiff went for an experienced manager, I'm not convinced an experienced manager would pick those younger players or plan for the future. I think an experienced manager would deal with the here and now, get the team out of the relegation mess, and then get them pushing up the table. And then what happens in May, I have no idea at that point in terms of the future. Now, let's have a chat about the elephant in the room. I've heard, and I haven't heard this from the board, I've got to stress, but I have heard it from people who know people at the club. I've heard that Vincent Tan's preferred choice for manager is Ryan Giggs. Okay, now that obviously would cause a real not split, because that's not the right word, because any manager, the fan base will be divided. Neil Warnock's who galvanise everybody, are a rarity. If Cardiff went for an experienced manager, a lot of people would say, oh, we want a younger manager who will bring the youth revolution through that you're talking through. If they went for a younger manager, some people would say, oh, we need an experienced manager. So whoever Cardiff appoint, the fan base will be split. But with Ryan, the noise would be bigger because of who he is. Yeah. But what he would do is play attacking football and pick younger players, because we've seen the evidence of that with Manchester United, and we've seen the evidence with Wales, where he ripped up Chris Coleman's Euro team. He got rid of, the vast majority of players who got us to the semi-finals of the Euros, which was a big decision. And he threw in people like Nico Williams and Connor Roberts and Joe Roden, and he gave Ethan Ampadu more of a head, and he gave Dan James a debut, and he gave David Brooks a chance, and I could keep going on. There were a number of them who've all gone on to get sort of 40, 50 caps now, and he played attacking football. So if, and it's an if, because it's not come to me from what I would call a credible source, if Ryan Giggs really is Vincent Tan's preferred choice, well, that situation you're talking about could happen. But I suspect, but obviously it would come with an awful lot of noise and an awful lot of baggage because of certain situations that we know about. So he's the one who would be able to do what you're talking about there. And he will also obviously have the character to be able to deal with a inverse commas big club like Cardiff, because Cardiff are hardly Man United, are they?
No.
You're smiling there.
Yeah, I have a certain insight into some things.
Go on then. I've been open. You be to a degree. You be open as well.
Well, there's two things I would say. Number one, I heard 100% exactly the same, that he was Vincent Tan's preferred choice. And the last time I brought him up on a show, which was, I believe, when I hosted the phone in, all the comments was, every single comment was no, negative. Everything was negative. However, just very quickly looking through the most recent sort of comments I can see, there's 2 no's and the rest of them are yes. So that's different. So I just think it's a split. From a footballing point of view, as a manager, I think he's a good choice. From a purely football point of view, if you're only looking at, is he a good choice as a manager? Yes. And I think he also, like you say, would be good for the young players. However, I would question whether Cardiff City as a club need more kind of drama and off the field things that are going to distract from off the pitch. And I think the noise, certainly for the first few months, would be loud, shall we say. I also have heard that there's no guarantee that he would take the job, and he would need a bit of convincing. Although that was like a couple of months back. But it wasn't out of the question either. So it's kind of interesting. Although I did hear, like, about a week or two ago, I kind of was told by, similar to what you just said, like people who would kind of know things, but not necessarily like the sort of the people who you take it as gospel from, should we say, that they had maybe had a chat, and for whatever reason, either from the club side or from his side, they kind of said, one side had said no, but that can change by all means, and also, yeah, like I said, it wasn't from someone who I treat as gospel. Second of all, I think from a financial point of view, I think he would cost quite a considerable amount in wages, and then I question is like, does he want his backroom staff won't be cheap and blah blah blah? Would he want a budget? There's a whole host of other questions. But I go back to, from a purely footballing point of view, I think the best football that Wales played over in recent memories was under Ryan Giggs, and he also went with the young players, that's a big plus for me personally. Like, whoever the manager is, if they're willing to really play with and utilize the young players coming through. So, from that point of view, but then I would also say, from a managerial point of view, there's several, or at least a few other names that I personally think would be more suited to the job, because he doesn't have championship experience. I know he's played at the top level. He did everything in the game, but he also, like, the championship is not like any other league, and we've seen managers, ex-players, the Lampards, the Gerrards, or whatever. I don't know if Gerrard did manage in the championship, but certainly Lampard, and they didn't find it easy coming down into the championship. Even Rooney struggled a bit at Birmingham. Looks like he's starting to get it together a little bit with Plymouth. But there's no guarantee that just because he did all right as an interim manager with Manchester United, and just because he did all right as a Welsh manager, that would translate to the championship, with the noise and with everything, with the split fan base, with the finances. So I would question that. But ultimately, mate, if the owner wants him and he's interested in the job, it will happen, regardless of what I think, what you think, what the fans think. It could be a 90% to 10% split against. But if Vincent Tan wants him and he wants the job, probably going to happen, isn't it?
Well, I don't know about that, because
I don't care what the fans think, mate. Come on.
Vincent may be persuaded that the drama is against. In terms of the fight, I had the same thing. That can they really afford Ryan Giggs? Yeah. But what I would say to that is, I'd say there's two things to that. Number one, I know for a fact he is desperate to get back into top level football.
Yes. Yeah. 100%.
I know that for a fact. Yeah.
Me too.
And he feels there's unfinished business there. Number two, the financial thing. If he is that desperate, then he'd have to accept that that the football club can only afford so much, just the way Wales can only afford so much. Yeah, nowhere near the salary that Giggs was used to with Man United. But from a financial point of view for the club, it would, somebody like him bringing through the younger players who would then go on to be sold for big money in the future would make economic sense. So, Simon, this is the whole point. Otherwise, the business model isn't fit for purpose. Yeah, business model has to be maximizing your academy, utilizing the young players instead of letting them drift away or drift out of the game, utilizing them. And then, whether we like it or not, Cardiff City always has been, from John Toshak onwards, and always will be, a selling club. And so then you sell those players to bring money in, but that reinvests into the squad and into the team. But you need a proper model and a manager prepared to go down that route, because it takes a lot of ambition to go with younger players. Most managers wouldn't do that. Most managers would go for experience. Easiest thing in the world for Giggsy to do with Wales was to stick with Chris Gunter and Neil Taylor, and particularly Ashley Williams, big characters in the dressing room, who we had to have very difficult conversations with. I remember him telling me once, had to have very difficult conversations with, to explain to them why they weren't in the team going forward, because other players were bringing more to the team. He explains that he'd been through that, both as a younger player and as an older player. So he went through it as a younger player with Man United, as a class of 96, class of 92, with Beckham and Scholes and the others, who re-energized that team and suddenly took them to more major trophies and the first Champions League, of course. But he also then experienced it as an older player, when he's giving an example of in training, him against Gary Neville became a bit stale after a while. So Ferguson signed a Brazilian called Rafael, I think it was, He said all of a sudden he's got this young Brazilian running at him, and he realised he had to up his game. So he sees the value of young players, and he walks the walk with Wales by picking them rather than the senior players. And of course, with young players, the future is golden. That doesn't mean I'm advocating Ryan for the job, by the way. I'm just trying to explain there would be economic sense to it in terms of a business model. But obviously, if they can get a figure like that who can handle the pressures of being manager of Cardiff City and also be prepared to play attacking football with younger players, but without the drama that you're talking about, well, that would be the ideal scenario then, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would from a footballing point of view. And I tell you what, you do make a good point in terms of bringing through a group of young players. I do like that aspect of it. That's something I hadn't really considered. Reese in the comments says Giggs became sporting director at Salford City back in February. However, I don't think that's a particular issue to it because he's one of the part owners, so he can come and go as he pleases in terms of starting and stopping that job. One thing I will say, and Martin's kind of alluded to it there, he says Giggs would bring in better coaching staff. I think there's been questions on Errol Bullett's coaching staff and the coaching staff that has kind of been in place over the last 18 months. And I do think that there would be a definite improvement. I mean, what I can tell you is if he's the manager, there's even less chance of the club working with me. But there we go. That's just part and parcel of it, I guess. Look, at the end of the day, I said it many times, or I've said it a few times, I don't think he's the worst appointment. In fact, from a footballing point of view, I think it's a pretty good appointment. And I think what other people say, there's a few people said in the chat there, like the people who were against him, the majority of those, if he picks up, if he wins 5 from 5 and we're playing good football, they would just, do you know what I mean? Like they'd get on board pretty quick. So I don't know, mate. He wouldn't be my preferred, and not just because of anything else. He wouldn't be my preferred choice because I think there's better choices. And I could name you sort of 3 or 4 who I think would be better now and long term. And then I could probably give you another 2 options who I think would be better long term if we put other things in place as well. For example, like I'll talk this one because he's ruled out through his health. Tony Mowbray would have been my pick when Errol Bullett left. He likes to play good football. He also likes to play with young players, but he's also, I think, would make sure that just everyone, the squad, is doing everything that it should be doing on and off the field. Obviously, unfortunately, that's not able to happen at the moment. There's a couple of options. I look in the Premier League, by the way, mate, and there's a couple of managers who are on the brink of losing their jobs. And I think, could we hang around for them? Gary O'Neill is one which I would be really interested in. I also, by the way, he was one of the best loan players I ever saw down here. He was incredible. But that's a long time ago. So I think Gary O'Neill would be a good choice, but obviously he's got a job at the moment. Slaven Bilic is one who's been around on Twitter and everything over the last few days. I think he'd be an excellent choice. He's got a very good record, plays excellent football. Is one that you could conceivably be a long-term manager. Very experienced.
How would he be long-term? I can't see him being long-term. I think he'd be an excellent.
He's not like 70, so if he does well, he'd be able to stay, is my point. If you bring in someone who's 65, 70, they're not going to be there 10 years, are they? Most likely, generally speaking. Long-term at the moment, I don't think is a Cardiff thing at the moment. I think it's just... I saw a lot of people saying Rob Edwards would be a good choice. I just saw his comment. Someone commented on them there. If he was to... Not Rob Edwards, sorry. Rob Edwards. Luton manager, isn't he? Yeah. But I don't think the players we've got suit the way he plays. So that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I don't think we'll have much money to spend in January for a new manager to go and sign X, Y, and Z. And we'd certainly have to move some players out. Pan mentioned the other day Gus Poyet, which I thought was quite an interesting choice. I don't know, Paul, let me put it to you then. You're in charge for the next 10 seconds or 30 seconds of Cardiff City. It's your decision. Who are you appointing as manager of Cardiff City? And why?
I wouldn't appoint Rob Edwards.
No.
I'm not sold on right. I know that he was one that Wales wanted, were very keen on. I thought that would be quite an underwhelming choice for Wales, to be honest with you. I could be sold on O'Neill, but of course these are irrelevant because even if he were to lose his job with Wolves, he's not going to jump straight into another job. There's too much going on behind the scenes. So same with Mowbray. Mowbray, I think, was wired up in hospital until reasonably recently. So, I think Mowbray's the sort of person who actually, a Mowbray of 3 years ago would be like Warnock. I think he would galvanise the fan base. I see somebody there has just mentioned Nathan Jones. I think there's a feeling that Nathan Jones would galvanise the fan base. Here's another example. Nathan Jones did really well with Luton, but when he moved up to a bigger club, Stoke and Southampton, he didn't do so well for whatever reason. Cardiff are very much of that ilk as well. Some managers just do well with lower league teams, if you like, or teams with lesser expectations. Let's put it that way. So I'm not saying that Jones wouldn't be good. I could see some method behind that one at least, but I'm not convinced on that. I don't know. Two of the names you've mentioned there, Poyet and Bilic, I suppose I could be sold on both of those.
I know you weren't sold on Steven Schumacher, for instance, who was quite heavily touted around.
No. I think the job would swallow him up. I really do. It's one thing to manage Plymouth Argyle. It's another thing entirely to manage Cardiff City with the expectations on the football club here, which may be flawed expectations, by the way, but they exist nonetheless. So I'm not convinced by that one at all. I'd be happily proven wrong. But it seems that the hierarchy don't seem to be convinced as well, doesn't it, Simon? Yeah. I can see method to gigs, but I, like you, think, I could understand people saying we don't want that drama with our football club. There's enough drama as it is. So I totally get that argument. So I think it's hard. So for all the flack they get, I think it's hard for the board as well to make this call, but ultimately it's up to them and they have to get it right, don't they? So it's not an easy call. I come back to what I said much earlier on in the show, that a Neil Warnock who galvanises the entire Cardiff fan base is a rarity. Whoever is appointed, there are likely to be a lot of people against that kind of appointment as well, albeit they'll obviously back the individual as soon as he's in situ. But let's say some will want a younger manager to be a progressive manager, to bring the kids through the way you're talking. Others want an experienced manager because he's got to have championship experience. There's a message from Jeff there saying Bilic will play the youngsters. Will he? I don't know too much, to be honest with you. What do you think?
He's got a pretty good record of playing young players. Like, he certainly doesn't, he's not one to play, not to harp on Errol Bullock, but just in terms of, like, he liked experienced players, didn't he? Sort of your 28, 29, where Bilic has got a record for playing the young players coming through the academy and stuff like that. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, if he does that, and given his record, wouldn't he then be a very, very good appointment if they were able to go down that route?
Yeah, I think he'd be an excellent appointment. What do you make of? Let me put a couple of names to you then, mate, and you can tell me why or why not, in terms of whether you think they'd be good or bad or indifferent. Alexanderson from Corvick obviously was linked due to the links, probably in part between Vincent Tan and the clubs and stuff like that. I wasn't as when he first was linked with it. I saw a lot of people very much against it, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't as against it as some people were, but I do think it would be a big risk and a bit underwhelming. What do you think?
I think it would be a ginormous risk and terribly underwhelming.
Yeah, me too. What about? And also, someone just pointed out Nathan Jones's stats at Charlton this year are very, very underwhelming. Very low scorers, chances created very low, very defensive, and they're not exactly top of the league and flying. So I accept what I have said and other people have said, that he probably would galvanise the squad, the fans. He's a Cardiff boy. People would like that, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's the right man for the job just because he's a Cardiff fan. I'm a Cardiff fan, doesn't mean I'm the right man for the job. Here's another one for you then. I don't know how familiar you are with him, but Brian Barry Murphy, very young coach, very highly rated. Obviously, recently left Manchester City as their elite development manager, or their under-23s as it's called everywhere else. In my opinion, I think Cardiff should get him involved in the club, whether it's as a coach, as a manager, as a technical director. I think he's that forward thinking, and he could be that trigger to move things in the right direction in terms of a structure off the field. I'm not entirely convinced he should be the manager, but if we were to bring in, say, for instance, a Stephen Schumacher, say, in the summer, after we got an experienced manager till then, bringing in a Brian Barry Murphy as a technical director or something like that, I think that would be very progressive thinking and would be a good sign. But I also don't think it would happen. Here's a name then, mate, completely out of the left field, which I haven't seen anyone else suggest. I did suggest him as a coach come the summer. Stephen McPhail, doing very well in Ireland, building his reputation as a coach and a manager. Would you take that risk?
No.
I'd like to see him come and do some coaching here, even if it was with the 23s, and see how that goes.
I think the perfect job for Mac is one that fans, not me, fans have to take the credit for this. But I've seen them put forward this suggestion that he'd be the perfect director of football for the club. I think he probably would be. Barry Murphy, or Bryant Barry Murphy. Yeah. I could. It would be another ginormous risk, Si, but I could get on board with this one. It wouldn't be underwhelming like
I think it'd be quite exciting.
Anderson. Yeah, with his Man City connections and everything. I remember a few years ago the job became vacant, and we floated his name as a possible contender. I think the club were quite keen to see what the reaction would be, if you like. Yeah. I think it's probably a positive one with somebody like him, to be honest with you. So if they are going to gamble with somebody, that's the sort of individual I feel they should do it with. But the club remains rooted to the bottom of the table at the moment, Simon. And if people were to kick back against me saying that by saying we need a manager with experience and championship experience in particular to get us out of this current short-term mess, how can I argue against that as well? This is what I mean. I don't think you can win with this one. It's and it goes back to Giggs. I think so many would want Ryan, so many wouldn't want Ryan. I think it's a really difficult one to get the entire fan base thinking, yeah, this is the right individual for our club. I think Cardiff's in a position at the moment where some want experience, some want progression of a younger manager to bring the kids through. Ideally, you get a mix of the two there, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, I got to be honest, Paul, what I really want to see by the summer is a football person making football decisions, like above the manager. I really feel
that's not going to happen, Simon. This is an old chestnut that people raise with me all the time, and it becomes a bit of a weary subject for me now.
Yeah, because... no, I've had it so many times. It frustrates me, Paul, because we're so behind the times on so many things, and that is just glaringly obvious. One thing I've got to say, mate, very quickly, sorry, is Holton's just put in the chat, and I want to stop this rumor immediately so it doesn't take to social media, because I do not want it to happen. He put Steven Gerrard as a suggestion for the next Cardiff City manager. No, like, he is not a good manager. That team, that Villa team, which he nearly took down into the Championship, the next season under a good manager with minimal signings was up in the top 6. He is a terrible manager.
I don't disagree, but why would you be against Lampard, who I think is quite a bright guy? And I think Frank did a decent job with Derby. Didn't he get Derby to the playoffs, if memory serves me right?
He got him, yeah, but he had like Mason Mount and all these different, like, he had a lot of Premier League loan players who went on and, a regular Premier League players. What I would say about Frank Lampard is I don't disagree with you. He is a very intelligent guy. I think he has a lot of the attributes to be a real good coach. I'm just not convinced that he's, like some some world-class players, they just don't end up going on to, it just doesn't work as a manager. And that is obviously, look, I'm hypothesizing and filling in some blanks myself. It's not like I'm, I know what went on behind the scenes at these clubs, and I know what his day-to-day routines are. I'm just talking about what I've sort of seen from his teams. And even at Chelsea, in a team of superstars, I felt they were a bit tactically naive, and maybe again, he's inexperienced, and maybe now he's moved on a little bit and he's a bit more experienced. I mean, if you gave me the choice of Frank Lampard or Steven Gerrard, I would go with Frank Lampard, but I don't really want either.
Fair enough.
Some people will disagree, mate, and it's all opinions.
I would take Giggs ahead of both of them, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think I probably would as well. Pan says, what does Paul think about Gareth Ainsworth, who applied? He was also interviewed for the Hearts job.
Again, I get the romanticism of that one, given he's an ex-Cardiff player, but again, I think it's too big a job for him personally.
Yeah, it kind of fizzled. He was doing well, wasn't he? Was it Wickham, wasn't it? And then he kind of fizzled out. Although I've got to say, I've heard excellent things about him as a manager from some of the people who've played under him. I will say that. But I tend to agree with you. This is an interesting one. Martin says, what about Rosinia? Has he got a job now, Rosinia? I thought he was out abroad somewhere.
Again, his name did the rounds quite a bit, didn't it, in the summer when there was a Willie Won't he over Errol?
Yes.
And again, it's not, there were a lot of who thought he played excellent football and he would be perfect for Cardiff. I need a bit of convincing, I think, is the answer to that.
I got to be honest, if he was appointed, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, what are they doing?
And that's why I'm saying I would need a bit of convincing rather than instantly ruling him out or saying the job's too big for him. Yeah.
I don't. I think he was appointed as Strasbourg's manager in this summer. So I don't, I wouldn't have thought, unless things go drastically wrong, that he's, likely. Mark Hughes, please. I think Holton might be trying to purposely wind me up about his last two suggestions have been Steven Gerrard and Mark Hughes.
Is it favourite with the bookies or something? Or he was at one stage.
He was for a bit, wasn't he? Yeah. I mean, the bookies, I don't think are as, years ago, I think with the bookies, you could kind of gauge, they were never wrong sort of thing, but I think these days, like, for instance, Slaven Bilic is 16-1. I would have him much shorter than that. Mark Hughes was a favourite. I wouldn't have even had him at 20-1 if I was doing the odds. But then there's a reason why bookies are rich, mate, and they're never broke. So,
and Giggs, we think, is Vincent Tan's preferred choice. Isn't he? I don't think he might. I'm gonna have to check that out. That'd be a bit mad, wouldn't it, if he's not even considered? Let me emphasize where I disagree with you on this is you said, look, if he's Vincent's choice, Vincent will get him. I'm not so sure about that, to be honest with you. I think I suspect his name has been put forward. but it may then just hit a brick wall for all we know.
Um,
For different reasons.
no. So
which could be.
Sorry, I should have probably been clearer. What I meant is regardless of what the fans think. So
Right.
say there's 90% of the fan base. If you polled them all and 90% of the fan base didn't want him under any circumstances, what I was saying is if Vincent wanted him and he wanted to come, then he's going to be the manager, regardless of what the fans, the media, or anybody else thinks. So I don't personally think he will be the next Cardiff City manager. That's just my opinion. Based on
what I haven't mentioned here, Simon, is people say to me, "Who do you want? Who do you want?" As they do to you, no doubt. Yeah.
Yes, they do.
I haven't said it on here. One of my stock answers is, well, the one I consistently have battered on about for 4 years, and I have done, is Craig Bellamy. That's the one I wanted.
Oh God, it's depressing.
I have argued about Craig. I thought there's a great manager in the making there. He's perfect for Cardiff. Yes, he lacks experience, but people were telling me. But my counter to that was that, well, he'll gain it, but also that because of who he is, the Cardiff fans will give him more latitude than they will other people. He's the one that I always wanted, Si. But I'm afraid that horse has bolted.
Yes, it has. Here's one for you, and I'm going to finish on this question for you because I'm really interested in what your answer is to this, because I've kind of been polling people as I've been speaking to them over the last couple of days. Russell Martin, should he leave Southampton for whatever reason? How would you feel if he was appointed as the next Cardiff City manager?
Oh, don't be so ridiculous.
We've had ex-Swansea personnel manage before, and they've actually done it.
And there's nothing wrong with that, but not ones who have openly goaded Cardiff fans. No chance.
But as a manager,
I don't think Cardiff City fans want that sort of tippy-tappy football either. Cardiff City fans want a team that gets the ball forward quickly, an earthy, hard-working team that gets the ball forward quickly and then plays some lovely football in the final third of the pitch, which is exactly what happened until those stupid substitutions today. That's what Cardiff want from them. They don't want tippy-tappy stuff that Martin plays, for good or for bad.
No, I mean, when I said very true there, I meant about today. Like I thought that 20-minute period after the second half, after the halftime, if we can bottle that for the majority of the rest of the season, I'm very confident that we'll have a nice, enjoyable second half. Or not even a second half, is it? Second 3 quarters to the season. There's a long way to go, mate, and it'll be interesting to who they appoint. Here's one for you very quickly. Paul says, what about Aaron Ramsey in tandem with an experienced hand?
This is what I should have said. Yeah, this has gone under the radar. Should have raised this really, Si. I have felt that's a great call from Paul. Not now, it's too early, but I felt that Aaron Ramsey is a Cardiff City manager in waiting. I really do think that. The way I felt that Giggsworth with Wales and Bellamy was with Wales, I think Aaron is the next Welsh legend who could get the Welsh job if he wants it, actually, a few years down the line. But I think before that, an opportunity will arise with Cardiff City. And I think that maybe therein is the answer, Simon, that you get an experienced figure short term to the end of the season, possibly then to guide Aaron next season to take over full time. There would be a business model there. He's a bright guy. He's taken his coaching badges. I get the feeling, like I had with Bellamy, that there's a really good manager in the making there. And so that actually is one that's gone right under the radar. I don't see it as remotely possible at the moment. It's too early. He needs to keep focusing on his playing career at the moment. But I certainly think Aaron is a Cardiff manager of the future, and that might be nearer future than perhaps some of us contemplate at the moment. Would you agree with that? No?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. I think it's too early, and I think he'd say himself that it's not the right time at the moment. But I think, in the future, I could see it happening without a doubt. Here's one for you then. Yes or no question to finish us off this evening. will Cardiff City appoint a manager in the international break?
Oh, okay.
And obviously, we'll caveat it with it is just your opinion. You're not saying it's going to happen next week or whatever. Reese says yes.
I'm going to say yes if it's a choice of yes or no, but I will caveat it, if I may, by saying that I was told last week that Omar may get 1 or 2 more games.
Yeah, I was told the same thing.
So that won't surprise me if he's still in charge after the international break for 3 or 4 more games.
Well, I was actually told last week that there's at least a decent chance he might still be there. He might be there until January, but I don't think that's the case now. Things have moved, I think, and I got to say, in the last 3 days, just judging by the amount of people who have all texted me the same name, they can't possibly all be speaking to each other. So that says to me that something is starting to move. But
has the name come up on this show?
Yes, it has. But I was sworn to secrecy, so yeah, I'm not going to talk about it publicly until I get the okay to do so. But it is what it is. I think I don't think it's the worst thing if Omar Risa continues for a couple of games, because I think he's got the squad playing. He just needs to maybe. Do you know what? Very quickly, I wonder today, and this is just guessing. I wonder if he just tried to be too clever by shutting up shop, and he did it too early. Did he just try and should he have just gone like for like, Willock for El Ghazi, leave it as it was for a bit, and then if Robinson needed to come off, chuck Mate up there, and then with 8 minutes, 10 minutes to go, then go into a 5 at the back, but with a focal point up front, so you have an out ball. I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? The players are playing for him. Yes, I am. But there we go. Paul, as always, mate, it's an absolute pleasure. And I've really enjoyed this evening. This hour and 15 minutes flew by. Absolutely flew by. But so tomorrow night we have the Cardiff City phone in, 7:00 on the channel. We have a whole host of content coming this week, including finally a question of Cardiff City. I finally nearly finished editing it, but it is, of course, Team Abandonato versus Team Terry Phillips. Find out who had the superior knowledge on the night of Cardiff City. Was it the journalist, the author, or was it the former journalist, now club historian? We'll see. Paul, thank you, mate.
No worries. All the best, everyone.
Make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll see you tomorrow.